Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is the Aspen City Council work session for March 25th, 2024. On our agenda this evening, we have a financial update. We have some ballot question options or information. We're going to revisit the food tax refund question, and we will talk a little bit about council goals update. We're going to start off with our financial update, and that, of course, means Pete Strecker is here. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Please.
Thank you.
By the way, Bill has his hand raised.
Oh. Hey, Bill. Hi, Bill. We see. Yep, no worries. We see your hand raised and a mute. Maybe you're just signaling that you're there. We got you. And if you need to jump in and say something, jump in anytime.
Scoring points already, Pete.
Scoring points already. All right.
Bless you.
Well, I got a live screenshot here of our meeting room, just so you know. Thanks for having me here today. You know, the Economist Optimist Club is always a well-attended event. Honestly, I wouldn't call myself as an optimist so much more of as a, you know, a cautiously positive person. And, you know, I think it all comes down to planning. That's why financial planning is kind of something I really enjoy. Wanted to start off tonight talking about some of our revenue streams and how those looked at the end of 2023. Quite honestly, I want to tell you that we pretty much nailed it in terms of projections versus actuals. There are only a couple of small variances. Really, if I look at it, real estate transfer taxes are the one that kind of exceeded our expectations, came in at $22.8 million versus our $15 million estimate. We had really anticipated that real estate transfer taxes were going to come in about 25% lower than they had in the prior year, but they actually only came in about 12% lower. So, you know, it was still a decline, but it wasn't bad. There's a little bit more on that reasoning later on in this presentation. But that is one place where we actually had some upswing in our forecast to actual. We also had a little bit more money come in from the city's share of the county's 2% sales tax by about $2 million. So that was a positive. That goes again to the general fund. Otherwise, you can see that most of the tax revenue did come in as planned. Obviously, the short-term rental tax, excise tax, we did not have a budget for it. It was our first partial year of collections on that, so we brought in about $3.4 million.
And I wanted to just give you a compliment on that. You know, going through this and starting off with a slide that says that, hey, we seem to know what we're talking about is really reassuring. But the numbers here are really reflective of the work that you do, and I just wanted to give it a little bit of recognition. Really appreciate the fact that these came out the way that they did.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, it's something we try to keep a good pulse on. Obviously, I have a good team behind me as well, but you never know what you don't know. So, thank you. Looking at taxable sales, we did actually have another historic record year by 1% over the prior year, $1.2 billion in taxable sales. So that is a lot of taxable sales in the city. Obviously, I've highlighted the four major segments, I guess, of our local economy. You can see that those have kind of a mixed result, whether they're up or down. That's kind of been the case lately. Certainly accommodations has been seeing a little bit of softness last year and again this year. So we're kind of keeping an eye on that to make sure that we're steady and everything is looking okay. The other sectors really kind of buoyed us a little bit in terms of collections. That kind of helped us achieve that 1% overall. You can see that liquor sales, again, are down. That's just been kind of a routine pattern the last couple of years, but more importantly now because liquor sales are starting to pick up in the grocery stores. And so we actually collect those taxable revenues underneath the food and drug segment of our breakout here. So you'll see some of those wine sales that are happening now at City Market and other places showing up there. So they don't differentiate as well. Marijuana sales, again, are also down, and again, that's that impact that we're seeing statewide on kind of some of the surrounding states and their sales of that product.
Real quick,
Yep.
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that clothing is such a large amount. Could you break that down just a little bit for me to wrap my head around where, does seem like a lot of money just for clothing?
Yeah, so there is a mix of retailers in there. Obviously, we can have some online retailers that ship in here as well that'll classify if they're singularly clothing companies and not something that we would otherwise generally call miscellaneous goods. If they're strictly a clothing company, they would be shipping products in and being taxed as well on our sales tax that way. So it's a smattering of different businesses around the town. We do have luxury goods in here as well, so things that are more like the Pradas and the Guccis are tending to be in that category. So this is some of those other organizations, something like
Kimosabe, where would that fit in?
they could fit in there, that's correct. Aspen Sports could fit in there. There's a bunch of clothing companies. Corbeau could fit in there,
There you go.
so.
So Strafe, sure.
Couple more questions for you.
And technical gear like Arc'teryx, Gore-Tex pants are really expensive. That under sporting goods or clothing?
Probably under the clothing company because they don't really sell sporting goods themselves other than just the clothing side. Yeah. You actually can see that the construction number is also down. We've been noticing since Builder's Source pulled out of the ABC that some of our sales collections from that organization also has diminished a bit. So we're kind of seeing a lot more of Lowe's, Home Depot that are shipping into our community, as well as, you know, Miners and Ace Hardware and things like that kind of showing up there as well.
Question, I thought the use tax, is for like Lowe's that would come up to revenue stream for Aspen. How does that break out?
So it'll be classified as use tax if they ask for a sales tax exemption at the time of purchase, and that product is being put in place due to a remodel or a renovation of some sort, and then they'll pay the use tax as part of the deposit that they did on that particular build.
So where does that show up as a revenue?
So use tax actually gets reported for the transportation program. It will actually be recorded as a deposit when they collect their building permit, and we hold it on our balance sheet until they actually finish the product, and then we do a full audit of their program and then remit the delta back to them, or they owe us some money, and then we recognize as revenue at that point.
Thanks.
Interesting numbers on this chart for me were marijuana and liquor. I think we saw all-time marijuana and liquor sales maybe at the beginning of the pandemic or the middle of pandemic, and we've seen a decline over the last 2 or 3 years.
Marijuana's been going down for about 2 to 3 years,
Yeah.
at least. Liquor sales are kind of up or down depending on the year. Right now, again, they're showing down because we're kind of rebasing where that tax is collected. A lot of it's showing up in food and drug now for some of those other sales that are happening at the grocery stores.
Okay, and then health and beauty, a large increase in this report, but I think I recall that it saw maybe not that big, but similar type growth over the last 5 years, or 3 years even. Do you know why? I mean, this is a large jump.
Yeah, we actually have this bounce around quite a bit month over month as well. We have a retailer that will not always file timely. And so they'll actually send us big chunks of tax remittance periodically. They'll also pay the penalties and interest when they do, and they just seem to embrace that pattern of payment to us. So it kind of bounces around a bit in that particular case. It is also a very small dollar figure relative to our total taxable sales. On 1.2 billion, you only have $4 to $8 million of taxable sales.
Yeah, so that's my question, is really about the fact that if you're seeing a doubling here of their reporting, is it because of new facilities? Is it because of,
Not necessarily, and I don't know the last time that we had this particular vendor pay their taxes, whether this was, spanning over calendar years or not. So sometimes it might bring in some prior year's revenue into the current year and be reported that way. Again, a lot of penalties and interest that are getting recorded because of that type of action. And then you can have a lot of online retailers, so that's just not all local business, quite honestly.
Thanks.
On the lodging tax side specifically, we're seeing a very similar pattern that we saw kind of as the economy as a whole, where we have some winners and losers, obviously. Traditional lodging really is basically holding its own. It's relatively flat, just down maybe less than $500,000 in taxable sales. Where we saw a bit of a dip, was in the STR side, really where we went from $106 million in sales to about $95 million in sales. We are seeing that certain permits on the STR front are just being abandoned, whether they're the properties are being sold or people are just relinquishing them and deciding to do what we're seeing on that last bullet, which is long-term rental activity. We've seen an outsized increase in long-term rentals. So that is actually something we're going to dig into just to make sure everything looks appropriate, and we'll do a few spot audits here and there to see how things are being filed. But really, in some ways, I think it's perhaps pushing some of these units back into a longer pool, which has been, arguably a good thing for the community.
This raises two areas. One is that in my reading, it seems as though STR usage across the country has decreased. And the other is that if it's quantifiable, if there are people that are avoiding being active members in the system.
Yeah, so we do employ a scrape system on the internet that actually goes out and finds renters. It finds their properties, does property matches based on photos, and looks at other data sources to match it in to get an address. So it is a fairly sophisticated piece of software that really helps us out and identifies new properties. So there is still a concern that that can be happening, but at least we're trying our best to really identify those. In terms of just a softening of that market, I think there's a possibility of that. I think it really had a large uptick when the pandemic hit, and basically everybody had to separate, and traditional lodging really didn't work for that purpose. And I think there was a strong embrace to kind of move to that market for a while. I think, I don't have specific data on it, but I think there's a possibility that people are moving a little bit away from that and going back to some traditional lodging options.
Bill?
Thanks, Tori, and sorry all that I was a couple minutes late. Pete, one quick question and maybe, I guess, two questions. One is, could you explain what the second last row real estate on this table represents, please? And second question would be, I've seen some numbers that said that the decline in STR taxes were more in the 20-something% range. I'm not sure what that number might refer to. Here you have it showing as an 11% decline year over year. But could you comment a little bit more on what you speculate might be the sources of the decline in STRs? I know some of it was in the packet. I think we should also acknowledge that part of it is just because we are taxing and licensing them as heavily as we are currently compared to previously.
Yes, I do agree that the tax can have an impact on the amount of business activity that's happening in that market. So I don't want to say that that's not a possibility by any means. In terms of the 20% drop versus the 11%, I think we actually gained some ground in December, which was a heavier rental period. And I think we had a bit of normalization because in the past, a lot of booking entities would take in deposits or full down payments for the rentals and record it as soon as they received it. And then when the tax started in May, they had to change that policy and practice to actually remit the tax once the stay occurred and they actually earned the revenue, which is the proper way to do it. So we had folks in the past that were giving us more money sooner, and we were comparing to those higher months once we got to 2023. So we were comparing a little bit of apples to oranges in terms of timing of revenue. So I think that is why we made up some ground in the last month of the year, really, to differentiate between the prior numbers that you were seeing, which were around the 20%, and now going down to the 11%. In terms of the real estate designation in this particular case, there's a lot of businesses that are real estate entities that are also performing property management services and or helping with timeshare units. And so those are actually just getting recorded under the real estate designation, but in large part they're similar to an STR in that regard, but they are technically fractional ownership units and not short-term rentals under our municipal code.
Thanks.
Regarding real estate transfer taxes, yep, you want to go back?
Just briefly, you said that 47 of these have been abandoned. We had wait lists, so have all 47 of those been refilled?
Maybe not all 47, because it would depend on what zone they were in and whether or not they were being held over for some reason. So it just depends. I don't have the specific data on that. I don't remember if Emmy's memo a week or so ago included how many had been reissued.
You know, just as a heads up for future, I do think that we will be revisiting whether it's the tax or the quota or the like, but I think in a couple of years, we'll probably revisit STRs or not we, but a council that is seated here will probably revisit STRs, both taxes as well as quotas, caps, so. Ward?
Yeah, this relates to your query that the number of STRs, I thought we were aiming at decreasing. And so as some are retired, that would count towards the decrease in number within the zones. And was that number 10% or 20%? I can't remember.
The decrease from what we had to our targeted number,
Yeah, I think it was 15 to 20%, but it only applied to a handful of zones.
right, owner occupied is unlimited.
We'll take a look to see if we have it at our fingertips. The people who know this data pretty well are sitting here, with the exception of Emmy, who also knows it. We'll see if we can answer that for you by the time we get to the end of the work session tonight. And if not, we'll send you an email.
Thanks.
So, moving on to real estate transfer taxes, as I said, we did better than expected, only a 12% drop versus the 25 we were kind of anticipating. We still have very low inventory overall, so that's, you know, reinforced by this quote that I found recently. And I think that the reality is we're seeing price per square foot really buoying kind of our collection number at this point. We had a lot of high dollar sales this last year, again, over 20 million. And you can see that a number of transactions only dropped by 3% on this upper part of this chart. But that's kind of a little bit skewed because of the Burlingame units that all went on sale starting in December. So we had a lot of additional sales that had no taxable collection on that particular transaction.
That quote that you share with us there is, not shocking, but stunning nonetheless. I kind of forget sometimes that Aspen is potentially the most expensive home market in the country.
There's a nice treehouse for sale if you'd like.
Yeah, right.
So kind of the last point I think I was going to make on collections was that we had a really good year in terms of creating some quote-unquote free revenue for the community. We did a really good job on our investments this last year, made an additional $10 million on our existing pooled income or pooled cash, if you will. We're really trying to diversify those holdings, and, you know, in part, it's due to the fact that the feds really took a lot of drastic actions over the last 2 years to push up the environment for which we're going to invest in. But there's more to come on kind of where we're headed in the next couple of slides.
I have a quick question on that one.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Pete, could you, and you can follow up with this after the meeting if you like, could you show us what this represents on a percentage yield basis, both on interest and unrealized gain loss? Please.
Yes. Off the cuff, I can tell you that our return on, without including the unrealized, I think was around 4% for the year. And when you think about that, remember that we had a lot of investments that were locked in for multiple years, and we had 10 plus years of interest rate environments that were near zero. So as those investments are rolling off, we're pushing them in substantially higher, but it does take time for some of those to kind of unwind.
Great. And what's your goal for 24 percentage wise?
Yeah, I think we're still in that range of where we can get 4.5% right now. The market is going to turn though. So it's now is an opportune time to lock in rates as much as we can.
And are you able to take advantage of locked in period CD type of stuff, or does everything have to remain liquid?
No, we're locking in terms that go out 5 years as a maximum right now.
Thanks.
So on the expenditure side, you can see overall that our execution of the budget was 57%. Obviously, that is not quite as high as we're targeting in any given year, but it really came down to the fact of capital and resource limitations, if you will. We have a little bit of a skewing of this set of numbers too, because we had a $20 million placeholder in the housing fund that didn't have an immediate designated purpose and is there for opportunistic items for the council. So, breaking this down a little bit further, you can see that the operating budget was about 80% spent. We did have a number of vacancies across the organization all year long. That kind of limited some of our progress on certain operational efforts, which does limit the amount of dollars going out the door. In terms of capital, we've had challenges with regards to vendor solicitations and our own staff time, again, with those vacancies. And just, again, like I said, that $20 million that was kind of held as a placeholder in earmark for potential opportunities down the road. So you can see that we're anticipating likely to return about $26 million to the fund balance. And I put in this slide a number of projects that are still ongoing, a lot of those names and projects you know of. That's a significant dollar amount attached to those. So end of the day, we're anticipating about a $45 million carryover in the capital side to push that money back into the budget later this spring to keep these projects moving. So last couple slides are related to kind of just where we are and where we're going. These three slides or screenshots really kind of tell a story together. Obviously, the feds have been trying to fight the high inflation that you see in this graphic on the top that really shot up during 2022 and into 2023. They've been largely successful in bringing that down. Obviously, their target is around 2%. They're sitting right around 3% right now. So they have that last 1% to go, and that's kind of always the most challenging. How they did that is really represented in the second graphic, which is they raised the Fed's funds rate, the borrowing rate, which really is meant to kind of slow down the economy. It slows activity. And you can see that it's capped out now at a little over 5% of late, but that's the thing that's going to start to drop. And they've been talking about that, and the plan is that it'll begin sometime in probably Q3 of this year at this point. But when they do that, they're always paying attention to what's on the bottom slide, which is the jobs report, and kind of how much does that stifle job activity. Because if you do that too quickly, it starts plummeting the economy and you start sliding into a recession. And so they've been really successful at this point of talking about it and getting people ready for it and not affecting job numbers at this point. So they're doing a good job, but at some point, we're gonna start seeing that Fed funds rate in the top come down. That also diminishes some of our investment income returns, so that's why we're gonna start pushing dollars into the market as soon as we can again and kind of lock in those higher rates.
The question I was going to ask is, if our taxable sales only went up 1% or they go up less than the CPI, is that a cause for concern?
Depends. So obviously, we're doing fairly well on our taxable income in terms of our revenue collections. So to the extent that our needs aren't outstripping our pace of collections, we're doing okay. At this point, our fund balances have not dipped because we're not spending more than we're bringing in. So it just depends on how our future needs kind of look relative to our tax income. And the tax income is about 50% of our total collections. So the last kind of, second to last kind of outlook item I had on here was obviously inflation is a big impact to our economy, but so is the strength of the U.S. dollar. And that really affects kind of the tourism industry that we have here. And you can see how much the strength of the U.S. dollar has done against some of these other currencies. Some of these are our, kind of market areas, tourist areas. And you can see that, the costs are going up exponentially for some of these folks that want to typically travel here. So it's just something to be aware of, that it's creating extra headwind as folks want to come and enjoy our environment when they kind of travel overseas.
That's Australian dollar and Brazilian real?
Yes.
Thanks.
And lastly, obviously, armed conflict and political kind of upheaval also plays into kind of the uncertainty around the world. Obviously, we're in a global economy, and so those all have influences on kind of our own local economy as well. But overall, we've really developed a strong base to kind of be resilient in these types of times. A lot of it has to do with the strength of the reserves in the city, and the fact that we're not really just a one-season kind of destination. Obviously, winter is a great tourist option for folks, but the summers are really grown substantially. That is really something that we've hammered home, even with when we go out and issue potential new debt and talk to investment groups, that we are a well-rounded tourist economy here, and that has paid off quite well. For next year, we're really thinking about focusing on our infrastructure at this point and really putting more money into the capital prioritization effort for 2025. Again, that comes back to also bringing forward that large $45 million balance from last year that we need to finish those projects as well. And finally, stick with kind of the community needs, the affordable housing, the child care, things of that nature that the council's already identified in its goals, and just stay focused.
John?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for your hard work, Pete. It really shows, especially on your projections, that you clearly know what you're doing. And I think the results of the city lodging STR taxes, those results look very promising. I look forward to seeing more information when it comes in. Thanks.
Thank you for all your work and results. I wonder if it's possible for us to do tracking nationally in the Mountain West to compare our trends to other trends in tourism. I know that as far as STR taxes and fees were, most, I think, communities in the Mountain West had some kind of an STR tax. So I'm curious if the amount of the tax if it can be correlated into lost days or national trends, or some way to put it in context, ours versus other communities.
If I could jump in there, we'll take a look at what CAST puts together. That's probably going to be the more comprehensive resource for the Mountain West around this changing environment. Right now, there's some new columns on the STR matrix that are around revenues. But the pieces that are not on there are average daily room rates, which we are still exploding compared to the rest of the state on what our average daily room rate is here in Aspen, which drives that tax revenue. So just as there's always a catch when it comes to us in those comparisons.
Yeah, the tax increase is nowhere near what the rack rates have increased.
I'm all for like seeing some data and maybe some correlation, but there are so many factors that influence that revenue, occupancy, location, et cetera. It takes a lot of other color commentary on that stuff to really maybe make it relevant, I think, so. But I'm all for learning as much as we can. Bill?
Yeah, thanks. One quick comment is sort of deducing some of the questions that were just asked and the comments that were just made is I think we need to be really careful and thoughtful about some of the regulation and burdens that we put on both locals and tourists and visitors, because they all have an impact on the cost of visiting and living in and buying property in Aspen. And it further drives sort of an elitist divide the more expensive we make it. And we might end up with fewer people spending more money, which I don't think is really a great goal for Aspen. So I think we need to be very mindful of that and understand that every time we enact a new tax or make a more burdensome process, we're really having an impact on those that come to Aspen, especially from diverse socioeconomic positions. Thanks.
Any other questions on financial update information? All right.
Okay. Are you ready to transition into the next?
Yes, please. Next item, we're going to talk about our possible ballot questions for 2024 and beyond.
Yep. So I have 3 different areas for the council to consider tonight. This is basically an informal discussion, really just trying to get ahead of any workload that might need to happen around these areas. So if you'd like, I can kind of take them one at a time, and if you want to pause to discuss each one, that's fine with me. So the first one that was in the memo was around the 1% housing real estate transfer tax and the 0.45% sales tax that's dedicated both to housing and childcare. As the memo kind of states, those 2 taxes really came into place back in 1989, 1990. And they've been renewed a number of times over the years, most recently in 2008. Both were extended to their current sunset dates of 12/31 of 2040. So these are 2 taxes that really are supporting 2 major components for the community. Obviously near and dear to the council's heart around housing and childcare. Obviously, they have 2 very different levels of revenues coming in from each of those. The housing 1% brings in, on a rough year, $16, $17 million, as high as $21 million at our high point. The sales tax brings in closer to about $5 million or so a year. That sales tax is split about 75% to childcare at this point, 25% to the affordable housing program. That percentage does get to be modified by the council if it so wishes. It's not done at a public level. Well, it's on a public level, not at the voter level, excuse me. So tonight, basically, I'm bringing these questions before you, even though they sunset at the end of 2040, there's an opportunity, if the council wishes, to kind of extend their current duration beyond just a 16-year term and kind of move those out further onto the horizon. And the rationale behind looking at it now is that you have a couple of fairly significant projects under both of these umbrellas. The lumberyard, obviously, and the daycare possibility out at Burlingame, both of which would need some substantial capital to build those. This gives you an opportunity, if you wanted to in the future, to leverage those revenue streams as a pledge against a debt issuance and basically bring those resources available sooner, if you will, on timing. So as staff, if that was a desire to kind of extend some of those durations, we would just want to know if the council wanted us to move forward with any polling efforts, looking to the public to see if there was an appetite to kind of have that discussion and put those on the ballot in November possibly.
Sam, you want to start?
I guess the question I have is, first off, I want to say I'm a strong supporter of putting this on the ballot in November. I do think it's vastly important to do so now as we plan out the projects that you just alluded to. The one question I have is, would the ballot language state how long these would go till? What would the expiration date of these two initiatives be, if known at this point?
Yeah, that basically would get framed within the question that the council would like to ask, and that's something that we could do polling on. Quite honestly, you could ask for a removal of the sunset date, or you could ask for a different term that goes beyond the 2040.
Initial thought would be to at least have it expire at the end of the debt issuance for like the lumberyard, whatever year that would be. Mm-hmm. That's the most logical thing for me, if not in perpetuity. So.
Thanks. I got Bill with a hand up. Bill?
Thanks. Pete, this is something that I really want to support, but until I have a clear, reasonable plan from staff on how the lumberyard is going to be executed, I can't get excited about this, and I can't spend my time convincing the public and those that look to me for advice to support this until I know that the money on the lumberyard is going to be well spent and it's going to be reasonably executed. I'm not there yet on the lumberyard. I need to have a partner identified. I need to have a good plan identified. I fully understand and appreciate what you're proposing here and the reasoning for it. And again, I want to be supportive of it, but until I understand how the money will be put to good use and reasonably put to use, I have a hard time getting behind it. So certainly not something I'm opposed to, but not the right time for me.
Thanks, Bill. Ward?
Yeah, for me, the most important one is the RET, because the amount of money that's dedicated towards housing, it's a relatively small amount on the 0.45% sales tax for affordable or workforce housing. I concur with Sam that if we proceed with lumberyard, it's going to be substantial. The sooner we build it, the less it's going to cost in the long run. And if we can finance to bond it, or, you know, if we do COPs or GOBs, I don't know it's not much of a delta between what we pay for those monies, but I think either one of them are going to depend upon an extension of the RET to reasonably repay that debt. So I'm looking at what, 30 years for the lumberyard. Is that reasonable?
It depends, obviously, but yes, we've been looking at 30-year terms when we do modeling right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure that now is the best time. We have till 2040 to extend that, but the sooner we extend it, the more reliable source we have for funding for debt for the lumberyard. So I think it should be extended, another, a time commensurate or that coordinates with paying off the debt for the lumberyard. So whether that's 25 years from now or 20 years from now, whatever, because we do have some time until 2040 when this expires or sunsets. And didn't we just do was it Parks and Open Space that we removed it, that is good in perpetuity?
That's correct.
Okay, so that is an option, Sam, and we've done that. The electorate supported it overwhelmingly. But the polling on that, I think I support that to see where we are, because we're definitely going to need it out 30 years from the issuance of the debt.
Thanks, Ward. John?
Yeah, I support getting both of these on the ballot if possible. I think doing that gets us a larger revenue stream sooner, and it's a vote for both childcare and for housing, supporting this.
Thanks, John. I'm definitely interested in more information. I would love to go to the voters to give them the opportunity to vote on this. Whether it's this November or not is maybe a different conversation, but I'm supportive of getting this to the voters probably as soon as possible. I did have one question here. Under in the charts that you've provided us, page 1 of 6, you have under the 1% RET, you've got council actions. And can you just can you explain to me the timing here of Resolution 81 of 2008 versus Ordinance 19 of 2021? The bottom two boxes there?
Why did it flip between an ordinance and a resolution?
No. How is it that there was how was it extended to 2024 in 2021 and it was extended to 2040 in 2008?
Correct. Yeah, I might have a typo on the 2021.
Okay.
That's a fair critique.
All right. Maybe,
I may have missed that.
no worries. Maybe those years are even just swapped or something. Anyway, okay, so it does follow a pattern like we did not do an action in 2008 and then,
No,
that's,
it's
okay.
gotta be my typo.
Okay, no problem. Yes, I'm supportive. I think that our community would love to weigh in on this. And I know that a majority of our community does support both the housing efforts that we're doing as well as the child care efforts. So, like I said, maybe there's more of a conversation around this November. But I'm happy if that information comes back to us as we evaluate that.
Would you like us to look at some polling options, not necessarily to go forward with polling right away, but bring back sort of what that is? I think there would need to be some narrowed focus to that work. There's lots of questions here too. You may not have I think you might need to prioritize what goes on the fall ballot too, to some extent. So I'm just understanding if you want that information or not. We want to start engaging. It's just a busy year to contract those services, so I want to get those under contractual relationship as soon as I can, even if the polling doesn't happen for a while.
And Ward's expressed his support for a survey and some polling. I sit in the same place as I normally do with this, is that I'm always happy to get more information. I always love engaging the public and getting their input. So in that sense, I'm all for it. However, polling doesn't always lead me to follow maybe what polling says. So I am all for the information, but I feel a level of comfort myself with going to the voters with these reauthorization questions. Ward.
I think it's a waste of resources personally. It's a very simple question with a good reasoning behind it. If the five of us and staff are ready to sell it to the community, again, I'm not personally ready to do that yet because I don't see a good plan for the lumberyard in place. But I don't think that this is a difficult question to pose of our community when the time's right.
Thanks, Bill. Ward?
Yeah, in response to Bill's comments that extending the expiration date or the sunset of these taxes doesn't commit us to issuing debt for the lumberyard. It just gives us an opportunity. It kind of sets the blocks in place if we do decide to do it at a future day, but it doesn't commit us to either the child care facility or the lumberyard.
Thanks. Well, Sarah has an outstanding question for us about support for survey.
Yeah, I don't need polling. I think I'm ready to put this on the ballot. The only question I have is the expiration date of it, but I hope it can come back to us soon and we can just decide upon that.
John?
I don't have to have polling. I don't have to have polling. I think the public is ready for this.
Okay. Sarah, what I'd ask from you is maybe a little bit more color from you, because you.
I'm fine without polling in this one. This is really for you all. This isn't a new tax question. I feel strongly about it when it's a new tax. In this case, we'll bring you back some pros and cons around different time periods for you to consider. And remember is that the best interest rates you'll ever get on any major capital project is through a general obligation bond that does require the approval of the voters. So just to be aware, there is an option here that the voters would see things again on how these dollars are spent beyond just a renewal question.
Thank you. John?
So it's safe to say this just gives us as city greater flexibility. Is that accurate?
It does absolutely give the council the opportunity to consider debt issuance to expedite certain projects
Okay.
that would be paid for with these funds. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Yep.
Topic number 2. So the city of Aspen is a bit of an anomaly in terms of its taxation of motor vehicle sales. The city applies a sales tax, whereas every other community in Colorado does a use tax. We spoke to the council about this back in 2021, when we had some communication with Department of Revenue, and we're discussing kind of our taxation policy, and they asked us to insert some additional clarifying language into our code, which we did, and did appease them in terms of how we do this application of the sales tax. But we are still sitting out there as a bit of an anomaly. The state is really making an effort to try to standardize wherever possible all of its tax code. I think it's really feeling the impact of the Nexus question that came up a couple of years ago with Wayfair. And so the question before council is whether or not you would like to go to voters and potentially switch the taxation from a sales tax to a use tax on motor vehicle sales and make us look kind of similar to the other community members within the state of Colorado. If the council did wish to do this, obviously there's currently a tax rate. You can just adopt the existing tax rate, and so there really would be no change in terms of dollars. It also currently does go to the transportation fund, so that doesn't need to change as well. It goes to all the different funds because it's a sales tax. I guess what I proposed in the packet tonight was that there are opportunities to change some of those things if the council wished and wanted to go to the public with that. It's not uncommon for a use tax to pay for things like bridges and roads, which would not fall under the current recipients of our sales tax. It would basically go to places like the general fund, or the AMP, I should say, to do our road work or our bridge work or things of that nature. It could also go to the transportation fund, where it could support more mass transit options for the community as well. So there are options there for the council if it wished. Or the council could keep it as is and do nothing at this point. Basically just trying to bring this up to the council to know that we are sitting kind of outside what's the norm in the state of Colorado. And I know that if the state had a voice in this opinion, they'd basically tell you that they'd love to see it as a use tax.
I would need some input from either Sarah, Jim, or Pete. It doesn't sound like there's necessarily a recommended action.
And staff would certainly lean towards making it a use tax, I will say. I think The biggest trouble that we have really is the collection process, is we don't collect our own use tax. It runs through the county, through the Department of Motor Vehicles system. We do not look, we don't fit the current mold of how they collect the tax at that level. So this would really streamline that process and make that look appropriate. If for some reason they ever came back and said that they don't like the way that we're doing this, we would have to figure out a way to collect the tax on our own, which would be very challenging.
Yeah, I do think that it would make sense to take the step of being consistent with the Department of Motor Vehicles and how they collect it. It'd be simpler for us. There's a lot of advantage to that, I think. And perhaps the biggest advantage is that it's not a problem down the road. Because if they quit collecting it, then it's an issue. So we're just trying, the theory is to bring us in line with the rest of the world, to be frank, or at least the rest of the state. I don't care about
The
it.
rest of our world.
Yeah.
Bill, comments here?
Thanks. A few questions. Pete, would the experience for the citizen change at all versus the status quo today?
Not at all. Unless you change the tax rate or you changed where the money went to within the city's budget, it would not change at all.
But in terms of the, you know, what it takes to register a new car, pay for it, when you pay for it, in terms of like in which scenarios you pay for it, nothing changes, right?
No, that would be identical. Absolutely.
Okay. And I'm trying to understand what the downside of the status quo is. I know you mentioned if the DMV stopped collecting it, it would be difficult for us to collect it. Have they ever done that to any other community to force this change?
Well, considering we're probably the only community that charges the sales tax, I don't have any reference point for anybody else that's ever been denied.
Got it. Is there a reason why we do it this way and everyone else does it a different way?
I do not have any history as to why we landed on the sales tax to begin with, unfortunately.
Yeah, it goes a long way back, and I don't know the history of how it ended up the way it ended up either. It's before me.
Got it. Well, I do think that it makes logical sense to use those funds for sort of a correlating function, like you mentioned, and I'm supportive of this. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, just to clarify in my mind, a sales tax it's limited to where those funds can be expended, whereas a use tax would give us more flexibility.
I believe that when you wrote the ballot question for the use tax, you can designate the purpose of the tax, where it will be spent. So you would have flexibility to make adjustments to where it goes now. So in the case where Councilmember Guth just spoke, he was supportive of applying the dollars, it sounded like, to transit or roads or something of that nature, which would be different from what the current.
And currently it goes into the AMP fund primarily?
Currently, this goes to parks and open space, childcare, affordable housing, transportation, and public education.
And to change it from a sales tax to a use tax, does that require an election?
It does.
Yeah, it makes sense to me to be in conformity with the rest of the state. But if the question fails, then it just continues to be a sales tax, is that correct?
Yes, it would.
So the end result is not gonna make any difference of what I'm paying or anybody else is paying for a vehicle, sales or use tax, it's just, okay, yeah. It makes sense to me to try to get in conformity if it gives us some flexibility. If it has to go to an election question, if it fails, in essence, the only thing it affects is where the money's spent.
It seems like having our process be uniform with the rest of the state makes sense and precludes the possibility of something going south down the road. So I would support this.
This seems completely harmless. Let's put it on the ballot.
Okay, thank you. The third option that I had in tonight's packet was to ask the council to move forward with a franchise agreement under, what is it, electrical services. Currently, we had a agreement with Holy Cross to utilize the right-of-way to include their electrical equipment and assets. And that agreement started back in 2003 and ran for 20 years. So it actually expired in 2023. I believe we did a one-year extension just recently just to kind of get over the hump, but we really need to take something to the voters per our charter to get this extended. This also includes a fee, a franchise fee, basically to use our right-of-way, and that's equal to 3% of their quarterly revenues that they receive on services rendered. Plus, they include a 1% fee for the Community Enhancement Fund, which I denoted in the packet, which has a lot of applications. We recently spoke about applying some of that to something like an undergrounding project up on the hill. So staff is recommending that we take a ballot question this November to get that agreement re-upped, renewed. Instead of doing a 20-year term, staff is really recommending a 10-year term just to allow for changes over time if something happens in the energy markets or the service area of the community, that we want to be a little bit more nimble than once every 20 years.
Does use of the right-of-way in the old agreement, I think the old agreement allows broadband. In the new agreement, does it include the use of the right-of-way for broadband?
Holy Cross is not the, not controlling the broadband issue.
Correct. This is for Holy Cross's infrastructure only, and at this time, they are not a broadband service provider.
No, but I thought that a public utility using the right-of-way extended to broadband, like when fiber went up Castle Creek, it went in the right-of-way that Holy Cross, I thought, had.
Well, the difference there is that the broadband provider, Pathfinders, worked out a deal with Holy Cross to use Holy Cross's poles and easements. And so they have a licensure agreement between Pathfinders to Holy Cross for the use of that infrastructure. So it's a little bit different than this, in that sense. So in that particular case, that had very little points where it touched the city's property. In that case, it was up near the water campus where it was not necessarily, we were being approached as a property owner, not as a granting government authority. I guess that's the best way I know how to describe it, yeah. Okay, just looking at Jim to make sure I got it right. So can broadband go into the right-of-way? The answer is yes, but it is not part of this specific ballot question we're presenting to you right now.
So those broadband extensions in the right-of-way would be an agreement between the entity that is extending the broadband and the owner of the right-of-way, like in this case, Holy Cross. They'd have to enter an agreement with Holy Cross.
If they're using their easement that we provide them.
And we would still have oversight as a government authority for extension, but, you know, there's very little above ground utility infrastructure in the community. And that is here is owned by Holy Cross, and we are having more and more neighborhoods push towards removal of that overhead and finding ways to bury it. So I don't think it's I don't view it as a truly viable option for broadband expansion in the community. It's a short-lived approach.
But the burying of fiber was coming up Rio Grande and up through the airport business center, was going to include the lumberyard area, and I thought that was in the Holy Cross right-of-way, I thought.
Well, the right-of-way is not owned by Holy Cross, but Holy Cross has some easements in the area for when things get outside of the right-of-way.
Okay.
Bill?
Thanks. I find this one to be interesting because we're a competitor to Holy Cross in a way. So I'm curious if this franchise agreement and these right-of-way easements are for the purpose of serving our utility or for the purpose of serving the properties that are not served by our utility?
I would suggest it's the latter. There is, in the regulatory environment that the utilities operate in, there are service territories that are predefined through a negotiated process. So for service territories to change from one provider to another is actually a pretty laborsome process to negotiate that, because you have to purchase all of the existing infrastructure that is there, even if your intentions are to replace it. So in this particular case, what this franchise agreement does is really just say, we recognize we use a portion of the city's right-of-way to provide service into these areas that the City of Aspen Utility Department does not provide direct service to, and they are paying a fee for that. Now, you may not be aware, but our own utility pays a franchise fee to the general fund, just like this. It's nominal, but nevertheless, it is intended for the same purpose, to pay back the general fund for that exclusive use of the right-of-way. It doesn't matter that it's a private, public, or co-op electric utility. They all are subject typically to a franchise fee.
Got it. Thanks. That's helpful to understand. So can I deduce that by granting this franchise agreement, we are not, there's not really a conflict of interest. We're not harming the ability for our utility to succeed. We're not hampering our opportunities for our utility to expand, et cetera. Are all those statements pretty true?
Yeah, I do agree with what you said in generalities. You know, we work really closely with Holy Cross in a field environment pretty regularly. And so we are able to work through kind of any issue that we have. I think at times what's important is that we have the opportunity to be pretty responsive because our linemen live right here in Aspen when we have an issue. They're not living down valley and making the commute up. In this particular case too, I think with Holy Cross is that as a valued partner, quite frankly, they have been able to push some things for our valley that have not been able for the Aspen utility to do on its own. So as we want to get from not only 100% renewable Aspen utility, we want to get to 100% renewable energy community, we rely on Holy Cross to help close that gap, and they've been pretty progressive in getting there.
Thanks. I'm fine with this.
Thanks, Bill. Other input? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Full ballot.
Okay,
Okay,
are you ready for your third topic for tonight?
we seem to be.
All right.
Best one.
So I'm here to talk to you about the food tax refund program. Obviously, we had a first reading on an ordinance to increase the food tax refund for this year from $55, which is the current rate, up to $65. That was a discussion at the council table when we set the budget for 2024. So in the packet tonight, I provided some history of kind of when the program first started and what the refund amount has been over the years. In 1970, when the city issued its first 1% sales tax, it created this refund mechanism of $7 per individual, and really was trying to mirror some of the tax relief process that was happening all across the state, where other jurisdictions weren't taxing food purchases at grocery stores. Our food tax refund quickly tripled in 1972 when the tax rate was actually doubled to 2%. And then again, it was increased fairly rapidly to $39 in 1981. After that, it actually increased a handful of times. When I first got to the city in 2012, I guess, I hadn't seen any increase until it got to 2018, and we did a 10% increase at that time from $50 to $55. So that's where it last stood. When we did that increase from $50 to $55, I recall the analysis, and it basically just included what would be the inflationary impact from moving that $7 up from the beginning of time until that particular moment. And then at that point, it was kind of a judgment call from the council where it wanted to land. It landed at $55. I've taken that same $7 in this analysis tonight and graduated it up again with inflation to 2023, and that produces a $55 award in today's dollars, which is right where we're at. However, that really doesn't include the increase from a 1% tax all the way to the 2.4% tax that we're doing today. So by also incorporating that, instead of $55 for a refund, it actually comes out to $132 per person on the refund mechanism. Councilmember Guth asked me, well, can you try to quantify, what does that actually look like in terms of an individual spending their funds at our grocery stores? At $132 refund, if you divide that by the 2.4% sales tax, that comes up to basically a $5,500 grocery bill per person per year, or a little bit over $100 per week at this point. So in the packet, I kind of let you know that currently at the $55 award amount, we're releasing about $200,000 in a given year for the food tax refund program. So any increase to the refund award obviously is going to send us higher than $200,000. The council certainly has direction, an opportunity to adjust that as it sees. You could increase it incrementally. You can increase it all at once. I would say that as we see the benefit of this refund going higher and higher, we do, as a staff, see a little bit more pushback when folks don't get awarded the refund amount, so it's just something to be aware of. And I would also note that the program does have a couple of nuances. It's not just the singular amount for an individual. If they are a senior, they actually get an additional, in this case, $55 for their award, so it's $110. And if you're actually legally blind, you actually get another $55, so you could potentially get $165 currently. I'm not exactly sure of the rationale of tying those additional criteria to a food tax refund, but they exist nonetheless. So with that, I'm happy to take any feedback.
Thanks, Pete. Any questions? Bill?
Yeah, a few clarifying questions. Thanks, Pete, for answering my questions on there and for a good presentation on this. I know it took some digging into history. First question is, I thought I read something that made me think that those under 18 are not qualified for the refund. So meaning minor members of your household are not qualified for the refund. Is that true, or did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, as I say, I was going to say no, but then Sarah reminded me, they cannot be the applicant on the food tax refund program, but they can be included in the applicant's submission.
Okay, that's what I thought, because I thought I've done this for my family in the past and received it. Thanks for that. Secondly, you mentioned that people get upset when they don't get granted the refund. Can you sort of, in general terms, explain why you've had some applicants who think they're entitled to it who aren't?
We've had a few individuals that would come by and say that, I live in this community as well, or I live just on the outskirts of this community, but I might use your grocery store. So there's different criteria like that. I've had folks that have only lived here a portion of the year, might want a prorated amount. And there's just some challenges with all sorts of different criteria for why they request to be considered.
Got it. I'm supportive of the 132 amount, but I think it also makes sense to amend this to get rid of those doubling factors for the seniors and the blind criteria. I'm not sure where those come from or why that's relevant to a food tax refund. So I think let's increase it, but let's make it equal across the board. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Other input? Sam?
Yeah, I wanted to say a big thank you for this one, especially doing all the work to get it to this 132 number, since I feel like we've been talking in generalizations for so long about this. So I gotta say, trust the science, and let's get it up to 132, which would make me really happy, because I know that this would be money well spent, because it'd be going directly back to our community, and they can spend it however they want. So I believe in this wholeheartedly, And I hope there's a third person up here that's willing to go up to 132.
What is your input on the other two items?
Oh, the 65 and the blind part? That one's tougher because I don't feel like I actually know enough as to why they, you don't know, right? I think you just said that. You don't know why they get the double factor of all the history that you did on this.
I do not have history as to why they got an additional bump.
It's tough for me to want to take it away. I mean, there's plenty over 65, but I don't even know how many two are legally blind in this community, so.
That's a very rare, rarely exercised additional provision. It's much more of the seniors. There's a significant number of seniors.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy keeping it the way it is, honestly. They're members of our community. It's been this way for a while. I'm just happy to give people back $132, especially since, like you said, it went up to 2.4%. I think you used a modest number as far as how much groceries people buy in this community. I know I probably am in line with that, and I'm just a single person, so it's easy for me to say yes to this, and thanks for getting to a number that's scientific and not just the highest that I was willing to go.
Thank you. Other input?
I just wanted to say, we did just raise it recently to 65, right? Not saying I'm against raising it to 132, but I think that's a huge jump right now. Couldn't we do it incrementally?
Do you want a response? Sorry, I don't want to interject unless you do.
If you'd like to respond, you're.
I would just say, just because of the science that Pete said, that I think we've been behind, so the jump that we were doing is not enough, and 132 is actually getting back onto the scientific method of where it should be to where it was when it was first implemented. So that's my mentality on it. Even though I totally agree with you as far as
Bless you.
what we just did, I just think 132 is the scientific answer of where it should be based off of when it was implemented, what the tax rate was, CPI, what it is now. Pete did all this hard work. I'd like to say thank you for that and trust the science on it.
I did want to, just reading the packet, when this amount gets doubled, there will be more desire to cash in on this benefit. And as has been stated in the packet, that is going to cost us some staff time. Just thinking about that in my own mind going forward.
Yep. Ward, your input here?
Yeah, I support the increase, but I'd also like to see an escalator so we don't have to keep revisiting this, that as the CPI goes up or the cost of food goes up, or tie it to something so that it increases as the cost goes up. And as far as the extra bump for over 65, I'm over 65, so I don't know if I can address this, but I'll say this, that fixed income, the food bump is, it takes a bigger part of the income, so I would support it. And for the number of blind people in our community, what the cost is going to be in equity, or I don't know if it's really equity, but I support it. So I would keep the bumps and support the increase, but going forward, I'd really like to see an escalator so we don't have to come back every few years and figure out a new one.
I'd love it to go up every year.
Yeah.
I concur with Ward on that. I think let's find a formula so that it's automatically adjusted each year.
I think Pete found the formula.
I'd support that.
Pete, can you, where are these funds? What fund do these monies come out of?
Yep. So we basically take this out of the funds that receive the sales tax, since it's basically tied to the same metric. The beneficiaries of the sales tax also have to pay for the refunds. So that would be the Parks and Open Space Fund, transportation, housing, childcare. And we cannot charge against the public education fund because that's just a pass-through.
Sounds good. Coming into the meeting, I was supportive of incremental increases going beyond the 65 that we were targeting for this year. But I was hoping to learn a little bit more about this. There's a couple of different items here that we were talking about, whether it's the over 65, the blind. I feel like there's more equitable way of getting these funds to the people that are actually
Need them.
expending them and needing them. But, you know, I'm supportive of the increase. I was in support more of an incremental increase as we work towards that 132. I just still have some outstanding questions around the nature of this refund. And again, just the equitability in how it's distributed and who it's distributed to. So I heard support from a few of you for going up to the math that Pete has presented to us that suggests $132 per year refund for people that shop locally in our grocery store. Is brings it to a parallel situation to maybe when it started, but we are 50 plus years from when this started. We don't even know necessarily some of the reasoning behind it and some of the facets of it. So I was really in support of a graduated system to work towards this as we understood more and as we answered some of the questions that were coming to us. But, you know, hey, this is a feel-good move, and I want to feel good too. So what I'm hearing is that we're interested in moving the food tax refund to 132. At this time, we're not looking at making amendments to the 65 or blind ability to get additional refunds.
I'm just gonna say, if you're thinking about doing it, this is the time to do it. You can't, it will be much harder later. Because you are doubling it nearly now.
Yeah.
And so while their individual award will be consistent until we figure out what is the inflationary index the council is comfortable with, I just would be very hesitant of a rollback in the future. And if you need demographic data, we can bring that back to you. It's clear that this is an aging community.
Yeah, like I said, I think that the best move for this council would be to come up with some increase, whether that's, $80, even $100 this year, as we get some more information and set forth a program for the future. We may be moving a little bit quickly right now to really get something that has sustainability and longevity for us. So that's again where I am, but.
Make you do more research. I was just wondering if you can find out how many people were blind and over 65 back in 1970 that were in the city of Aspen, and then we can set it proportionally to that number for now, because if people are living longer, then maybe the number should be higher, something like that.
Whoa, now you're getting into some stuff.
I would suggest that I would need 3 council members. That's a lot of work for a pretty small number.
I see where I get the angle of what you're trying to say. You're trying to get some parity between 1970 and here. I get that.
Because we have it in the money amount, we just don't have it in the blind or
Right,
over 65. I mean, I would joke to you that like people under 30 would be more benefit from this than people over 65 in this community, but
Well, that's a good point.
I think that's right, and I think that's, my comment was all about parity here, is we are now more than doubling the refund amount, at least compared to the prior amount, $55. Might be pretty close to double, a little more than double on the new amount of $65 too, but taking away the doubling factor for blind and over 65 is not punitive, because all of those individuals will be receiving the same amount that they were receiving. So I think along the lines of equity and parity, I think just getting rid of that and making it even for everybody makes the most sense. And that way we don't really need to understand what the reason was for
equal across the
that
board.
50 years ago. It's just make it equal.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
So I guess my real question, do we need more conversation on this? And we can do it right now, I suppose, but, is everybody clear on kind of where this is heading? Are you making a decision right now, that you might want a little more time to talk about this? I mean, we're in a work session now. This has to come to us, or this is not.
This is not for tomorrow night's or for this year's award levels at this time, unless the council were to adopt a change of the ordinance tomorrow on the floor.
Which I would want to.
This would be for the 2025 and beyond program at this point.
And Bill, I see.
You need the opportunity to budget for that.
See, and Bill's saying he's looking for an opportunity to put this into the budget and get the budget work done. So Bill right now is signaling that, going to tomorrow night's meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but he's signaling
That's correct.
that for tomorrow night's meeting, the intensive purposes of tomorrow night's meeting, he still wants to support the $65 for this year's tax refund, which was from 2023 food sales. This program would go into effect in 2025, which would impact people's 2024. Is that correct, Bill?
That's correct. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. So we're not even talking about necessarily instituting this tomorrow. We're talking about instituting it for 2025. And with that, I think that gives if that's the course, and I know you want to move faster than that, but if that's the course of action that the rest of the council wants to stay on, that would give us the time maybe to answer some of these outstanding questions that we have going to 2025. That is comforting to me. I would, Sam, I would entertain perhaps a higher increase, but not quite the full boat for 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go as high as anyone wants to, 132, maybe 100, I don't know,
Okay.
but I would hope.
We
could
can
go
have that
higher.
conversation at the table tomorrow. The information that we're looking for now carries into 2025. What you've heard here is that, yes, we are all interested in bringing it up even to the 132 number that you have shown us through your math and calculations. We also are interested in addressing those other two categories. And there might be other stuff that comes up. I mean, you bring up an interesting point about people that are younger side and how this impacts them. I would have to say that you're right, it's probably more impactful for them in a lot of ways. So maybe there's other things that we want to think about for that as well, but I think you have enough to kind of go on of the direction that we want to head.
Yeah, Your Honor, I think going forward that I'd like to see us talk about an escalator so we don't, as we come back for the 2025 budget.
We would like that information to be brought back to us. We don't know that there's council support yet, but we would like to see that.
Got it.
Awesome. Again, good work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us down to our last item here. This is a quick council goals update. You have information in your packet around this, so I think we're going to have somewhat of an abbreviated presentation at this time. Jen?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Jen Newton, Senior Project Manager for the City Manager's Office. We wanted to present the council goals that were adopted in June and to provide an update on where we are with all of those individual goals and milestones. There are 50 milestones, so we don't have time this evening to go through every one of those. So this presentation is focusing on just a couple of areas, the customer service standards and philosophy that's been developed, the information that's related to your community building goal related to both the Armory redevelopment, which will be the last presentation, and then the community development efforts related to a grant that we received for, sorry, I'm losing the term of art and I don't have it in front of me, but it's the project that provides a community land trust or community
Right.
sorry, lost the term of art. It's a nonprofit that can help with the funding related to that. So there are 16 individual contributors to the overall goals. So just wanted to provide a brief update, and actually Pete Strucker's going to start, so he's going to keep going.
All right, may I share my screen again, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
And so you may be like, why is Pete sharing this? He's our finance dude.
Right?
But
I've been wondering the
But
same
Pete,
thing.
Pete is also an agency director, which means he has co-shared leadership across the organization. And that includes executive sponsorship of organization-wide projects, of which this one, he and Tyler Kristoff are the executive sponsorship for. So they're gonna, Tyler's skiing in Alaska right now, so I think he got the better deal of tonight.
Seems like it.
Thanks for that, Sarah. I handed out this material to you all on your places. Sorry, Bill, I can send that to you via email. But basically, it just gives you some framework that'll kind of add some color for tonight. And I also apologize in advance. I do not have any cute clip art in this particular presentation. I'm trying to transition myself off of that as we kind of look to more ADA compliant presentation material, so more on that. So as Sarah mentioned, obviously, I am one of two project sponsors on this. Obviously, I have a lot of support, and I'm going to share more on that in the next slide. But as you can see, this is a top council goal. We are really trying to directly address this. This was always on the leadership agenda for this year, and we really just appreciate that this has kind of raised this high level of priority and importance, essentially. We feel like we already do provide a lot of great customer service, but what we really want to recognize is that we can always do better. So as Sarah mentioned, I was one of two individuals that were project sponsors, but we had a whole host of other folks that really contributed to this. We had 20 staff across 13 different departments, really kind of helping us assess, recognize, and kind of delve into the different customer bases that we have, because we have such a diverse set of operations here at the city, just all underneath a singular umbrella. But because they're all underneath a singular umbrella, we're really looking to try to standardize and try to create consistency for our customers. So the whole focus of this effort was to really look at how do we do that? How do we break down silos? How do we create continuity for our individuals that we're trying to serve? So this effort really went across 8 months at this point, and we started back in July of last year. And we really did some slow rolling, if you will, really talking about who our customers were, and we focused not just on the external customers, which, you know, is extremely important to us, but also our internal customers, because we, you know, the finance department has to lean on a lot of other departments within the organization to kind of get answers and to help support them as well. So we really needed to talk broadly about who it is we're trying to serve. And we really had a lot of opportunities to hear from different folks about their experiences and engagements with different individuals around our community, around our business community, tourism folks, as well as the business community and so on. We really spent some time looking at where is our exceptional service, because we do have some folks that really just do outstanding things, and it's kind of ingrained in their departmental processes. And then we also looked at where are our gaps, and spent some time doing that. We brought in 2 guest speakers over 2 different meetings. You can see that on the 26th and again on October 11th, both from CoA and CMC's hospitality division, to really hear some other outside perspectives and kind of how do they coach their staff, what are they looking for to implement in terms of programs to help create that good customer experience. We heard some of their horror stories, which was kind of interesting. We also identified where some of their experiences and the ways they tried to treat their customers won't always work in a public entity. You can't always say the customer's right in our situation. It's just not possible. So after we kind of did all of that data gathering,
You're not supposed to say that out loud, Pete. What are you doing?
well, you can't go against the code, right? So after we did all that data gathering, we really started to do an internal deep dive on how do we set up a framework to deliver quality customer service. And we did that in a smaller group setting, and then we brought it back to a larger group and really started challenging each other on kind of what does that look like. And then basically after that, we went through multiple rounds of iterations, and, you know, people are very good at wordsmithing, I gotta tell you, but we really wanted to get it right, and this group really took this to heart, quite honestly. The individuals that were involved in this process were fully committed. So what this is really is a goal to create consistency and have clear expectations for our staff. But with that, we also want to make sure that we're keeping authenticity, basically, when we deliver customer service. So what you're going to see tonight is kind of the first level of the two-tiered effort, which is really the core customer standards right now. We just rolled this out basically internally to departments, and what we're going to do on tier 2 is really have the departments flush out how do they enact these core customer services and standards. How do they deliver these things so they have a set of expectations that they know as a team, and make sure that that looks appropriate across the organization. And then we're going to document all of that work and then also review it periodically because things change over time. Quite honestly, the best example of that was COVID and how that changed our delivery of customer service during times when we had to shut the doors. Oops, went too far. So this is very much a high-level view of what I've handed out to you. It just has a few of the customer core standards identified here. There's 5 of them, all centered around that statement of authenticity. So we do not want people walking up to City Hall or to our community or calling us on the phone and feeling like they're in the line at the DMV. No offense, DMV. Or really, you know, being on an Amazon phone tree or something of that nature. We really want you to feel like you're in the city of Aspen, you're getting quality attention, you have our ear, basically. Departments are, again, going to set specific expectations around this on each one of these things with anticipation, engagement, consistency, and accountability, but again, all centered around that statement of authenticity. And we want to make sure that we also help each other kind of do quality customer service. So we are going to do things like make sure that we have the frequently asked questions being circulated around in our offices, so that if you hear of a question about golf passes, that you know how to get that right answer and don't have to always put somebody on hold or say you need to call this person instead or anything else. If we can kind of deliver that service at a singular point instead of having to push people around, that's going to be better for everybody. So I am not going to go through the next 4 slides kind of in nauseam. I just wanted to kind of share with them in the packet and also maybe just talk about 1 or 2 of these and let you see what they look like. Every core standard has these 2 secondary levels, which are expected behaviors and essential considerations. And the behaviors, again, is that kind of standardization across the organization about what do we expect when we're going to kind of engage in this level of anticipation. The essential considerations are much more around kind of asking ourselves internally what kind of questions do we need to consider? What is kind of like the deeper meaning behind some of this? And so again, this is being shared down at the departmental level, and they're really starting to go in and now flush this out. We again are trying to break down those silos in something like anticipation. We're trying to create that consistency for our members. Again, I'm not going to go through each one of these. I'm just kind of speeding through this a little bit. You can see engagement again in the packet. Consistency. Consistency, one of the things that comes up is, what do we do when we have an unhappy customer? And I want to say yes, and like I said earlier, you can't always say yes. Sometimes there is not a path forward on that particular desire for a particular customer. So there is an art to how do you say no, And that's something that we want to make sure our staff understands. And so there's, one of the key parts of this is education and making the customer aware of why the answer is no. That's going to be something that we're going to make sure we work on, so that we're just not, saying sorry, but saying, here's the environment that we're working within, here's the policy, here's the municipal code, here's what you can do. And we'll try to go from there with the customer and make sure that we can guide them the best we can. And obviously accountability. So what's next? Obviously, I told you that we have disseminated this down to the departments, and they're going to be working through an exercise over the next number of months to really put definitions for each one of their departments, not just at a department level, but even at some of the nuanced staff levels. If you're a field staff worker versus maybe if you're an office worker, you might have a different set of expectations on how you're supposed to be dressed or how you're supposed to engage with customers. If you're out in the field, you don't have to drop your shovel and go walk over to somebody every time somebody walks by and make sure they have the right, you look lost. But if they approach you, you might want to make sure that you're attentive to their needs. That may be different than if you walk in City Hall and you're looking on the second floor and wondering which way to go for finance. So we're going to make sure that we have a set of expectations for both departmental level and even at the staff level. Those deeper dives at each department will be reviewed by this kind of group of core individuals that already started this project, and make sure that those things are all in alignment with kind of an overarching feel for the organization. And then again, we're going to archive and save those standards, and then we're going to revisit them periodically. And the last thing I want to say is the sheet that I handed out to you, we're actually going to hopefully post this outside each one of our offices so that the customer kind of knows what to expect and kind of hold us accountable as well. And hopefully at the bottom right-hand corner of that document, we'll also have maybe a scan code to Aspen 311 so that they can give us feedback. And we will continue to keep pushing ourselves forward in this area and try to progress and keep up all the good work that everybody already is doing.
I'm just going to add to this that this will result in every department by June 30th having a written customer service strategy. And then there is a monitoring process associated with that we're working through with the departments about how they are going to integrate regular check-ins on their performance and progress, both through informal internal evaluation, but also eventually ensuring there's external feedback to validate or invalidate whether those standards are being met. This is part of our North Star program. You're used to the Compass Plan component, what you see during budget. This is a second piece to it. We have a third piece that's either business plans or strategic plans, depending upon whether it's a revenue generating department as well. So I think this is a good step forward that we still have to show you some proof on the ground and test of concept through this next phase. But I can't commend the staff group who represent a wide, diverse group of our employees. When we have 23 different lines of business that you're trying to create consistency across, I believe they've gone above and beyond in doing that, and they believe passionately in this work and are great ambassadors for this throughout the organization. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Bill.
Sorry, it was muted. Pete, great work on this, and all those on your team. I really appreciate it. This looks like a great start. I do want to acknowledge that, yes, there are a lot of individuals within the organization that do provide wonderful service and always have, but there's clearly some room for improvement. So I'm looking to see I'm excited and looking forward to seeing the results of this, and really appreciative of everybody's efforts on it. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Ward?
Yeah, my thoughts on this are, we spent a couple of 3 hours as a council retreat, and we set our goals, and then we kind of lose track of them, and we're setting the gears in process, and you guys are just picking it up and going forward with it, and the amount of time and energy and expertise and contributions that are evident through this presentation, I'm really grateful for, to know that what we say doesn't go on deaf ears, that it does actually get the ball rolling, and that's my biggest observation for that, and thank you.
Thanks, Ward. Sam, any comments or input?
Just echoing, big thank you for the work that you've been done. Customer services obviously was a huge priority for us when we did a retreat back in May, so it's nice to see all this progress and the measuring stick that we're implementing to make sure it's continuously being done correctly. Thank you.
John?
Thanks for all the hard work. Appreciate it.
I'll say a few more words than that. I definitely appreciate the work that you've done on this. I want to also give some recognition that this isn't easy work. This is the kind of material and such that there's not a whole bunch of guidance or guiding documents. You really have to have the meetings, have the hard discussions, wordsmith, argue over the wordsmithing and re-wordsmith everything. And so I just wanted to say that I really admire the work that's been done here by everybody that was on the team. When I sat down and this document was sitting here in front of us, just even seeing it start off with the authenticity, I thought was just great. And then as I read down here, anticipation. So these items on the customer service framework document are, accountability. Yeah, we talked to that one quite a bit. The other four, consistency, engagement, anticipation, and authenticity, I just thought were really great to be brought to the table through this process. Really, really impressive. The last thing that I'll say is I know that everybody, if not the greatest majority of our employees, come to their job and their office and their position with nothing but the greatest of intent. They are members of our community. They treat other members of our community just the same as they would want to be treated. So the only thing here for me is that that consistency. Not everybody has the same views around customer service. Not everybody has the same views about respect and efficient business. So getting this all into a form that everybody can share is really valuable, because some people maybe pigeonholed or said, oh, that person does this and they're just not as good. But they might not know that that's not what's expected, and they might not know that that is where they want to be for a level of service and the like. So anyway, I just think this is great work. I really appreciate it. As Sam said, this was not just important to us as a council, but it's important to our community as well as the people that work with it in the organization. So I just think great work. Great work.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there more update?
There's at least two more.
Two more updates. Is Pete going to be coming back to us in either of those two? Okay.
You're done with me for today.
All right. Well, thank you, Pete.
Good afternoon, City Council. Haley Hart, Long Range Planner. Ben Anderson, Community Development Director. I've got a few slides that I'd like to share in regards to the Community Land Trust update, if that works for you all.
Please. This is interestingly timely. I walked into my office today to a publication all around CLTs as it relates to affordable housing that somebody brought in to share with me, and on the front was a big question. Is the city of Aspen talking about this? So the answer is yes.
That's great.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
And I'm sure everyone's seen the article in the New York Times about Paris. Okay, great.
Before I turn this over to Haley, and I want to give Haley and Liz Axberg, who works in city manager's office as a housing analyst, a lot of credit for seeing this project forward. I got excited about this concept in 2019. I was at the National Planning Conference in San Francisco and did a tour with a community land trust in Oakland who is really setting the standard, I think, for doing great work in this area. And, I think, community development downstairs, I think a lot of folks think that the land use code can solve everything. And that we've got tools and all the levers that we need to kind of respond to the things that the community is desiring. And I think this is a really exciting opportunity that once it gets created, won't have anything to do with the city of Aspen, won't have anything to do with the land use code and trying to use levers in the land use code to encourage additional affordable housing development or development of locally serving commercial space. So I think that this, kind of framing this, Haley's going to get into the details a little bit about the project, but I think this is a really new step for Aspen. We've done a lot of groundbreaking things over the years, used pretty much every lever in the land use code that we can to try to achieve these things. And I think that this is a really great opportunity outside of that. So with that, I'll turn things over to Haley.
Great. So I'm just going to kind of roll through a few things, starting with, what is a community land trust, how it relates to Aspen, and then sort of where we're at in the process. And I know that you're all familiar, you saw this come through a resolution for the DOLA grant last fall, but just a little bit more information. So there's over 200 community land trusts, or CLTs, nationwide. And it's growing. It's a really popular movement right now. So I really feel like we're sort of in the heartbeat of it, which is exciting. And a CLT is typically an independent 501c3, nonprofit governed by its own board, its own staff. That's all run by the nonprofit. And if a CLT were to be developed in the city, it would be independent from the city of Aspen, so it would have that 501c3 status. And a CLT ensures long-term affordability through acquiring land, homes, or commercial spaces. And those are acquired through either donations or they can be purchased through financial gains such as grants or fundraising. So think of it as a typical nonprofit as it's acquiring land. And when the property is ready to be sold or leased within the CLT, a qualified tenant pays for the home or the unit. So this could be commercial, this could be affordable housing. And the land and the cost of the land owns by the trust. So this is sort of the CLT model. So the CLT separates land ownership from property ownership, which helps create that permanent affordability as the units brought sort of in and out of the CLT's holdings and put back into the market for the next tenant. So that's sort of how it remains perpetually affordable. And that really enables the CLT to also remain consistent with the community desires and the mission of the CLT. So as we've sort of been going through this process of understanding what a CLT is, things that we keep hearing is that, they're typically grassroots movements. They're typically started by concerned citizens who want to see more affordable housing in their community. So there's really this sort of like grassroots component to the startup of CLTs and really creating the mission that the community wants to see served in the community. So these are images, perhaps, I don't know if this is what you saw, Ben, on your tour. This is Hasta Muerte Coffee Building, which is an example of what a CLT can achieve. And this is a mixed-use building that was acquired by the Oakland, California CLT, Oak CLT. And this homes a coffee shop on the bottom floor, and then it has rental units on the second floor. So this is just one example of a mixed-use property and what a CLT could, acquire and sort of achieve.
I got a question for you. So in a situation like that, in Oakland, for example, would only one CLT exist in a community, or do multiple CLTs pop up? Do they end up like competing with each other?
There could be, There could be multiple, but it really depends on how you plan this CLT. And actually, as the local government, as a possible sponsor, we do have a little bit of control, namely about where we may make donations to help support. That can help minimize the potential of conflict. But you also have overlapping CLTs based upon their use. So you may have one that focuses solely on affordable housing in their mission, and you may have another that's focused on affordable commercial in their mission. So they can coexist quite well and often partner together.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just spoke with one of the executive directors for the CLT over in Park City, who Diane had connected us with, and it sounds like they sort of weave in and out, the CLT does, based on like what Habitat for Humanity is doing in their local chapter and what the city's doing. So the CLTs sort of plug in as other organizations need them. But this is sort of like the generic model of like, you know, the independent nonprofit governing solely.
Did you just say Park City has a CLT already?
Yes.
Good to know, thanks.
Okay, so bringing it into our community. So the CLT, you know, as we all know, is one of the sort of last few affordable housing strategies not explored by the city of Aspen. And this is also one of the land use best practices as outlined by the Department of Local Affairs, or DOLA. And so to meet the city council goal of exploring the public-private and nonprofit approaches to promoting economic vitality, staff applied for this DOLA grant that y'all saw come up last fall, and we were subsequently awarded the grant. And so we were awarded $150,000 from DOLA, and we did a $15,000 match. So we have a total of $150,000 to spend on a feasibility study and a design approach for a CLT in our community. So we are at the RFP stage right now for the grant, and we broke the RFP into 4 phases. And this was recommended by a group that I'll bring up in a second. But the first phase would basically deliver the feasibility study and dig into how a CLT would work with APSHA and our existing conditions within the city. They would also look at the feasibility of including commercial spaces. So again, this RFP is very clear that we want this for both affordable housing and for commercial spaces. And additionally, they would deliver a case study report. So we're looking at best practices. And this would also launch the community engagement kickoff. So just starting to meet with pertinent staff, pertinent community members and partners. And we anticipate phase 1 to be finished in spring of 2025. So 1 year, or a little bit less than a year for phase 1. Phase 2 would be the program in business development. So we're looking to Grounded Solutions Network, which is a national 501c3 supporting communities in development of CLTs. And they also help advance affordable housing solutions and other ways. And they're really sort of the central hub for all things CLT. And they've got a great amount of resources for communities looking to start or expand the CLT. And they're the ones who actually recommended us phasing it out in this exact manner based on how they've seen other communities gain success in creating a CLT. And they really emphasize the fact, again, kind of coming back, that it needs to be community-based and to really have a robust community engagement process. So we anticipate the consultant coming to the city multiple times throughout this phase 2 to conduct multiple rounds of outreach and really get insight from the community of what they would want this nonprofit to look like. So phase 2 deliverables would be a 5-year business plan and an operating plan, a budget and legal governance, and extensive community outreach. And we're anticipating this sort of being due winter of 2025. Phase 3, this is sort of, we put this as optional just based on how phase 1 and phase 2 play out. And this would just be the official launch of the CLT. So based on phase 1 and phase 2, we think this would be like spring of 2026. And at this point, the city really would be hands off. And phase 4 is just the consultant closeout, right? So the DOLA grant, we've got 2 years for this cycle. So all of our reporting and sort of, memo writing would be due 2026.
2 years is about the timeline process for getting this done?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we had actually had a little bit of a longer timeline, and Grounded Solutions suggested pulling it back, thinking that we could do the feasibility study within, a 6 to 8 month period. Sort of the business plan and the community engagement, they thought we needed a little bit longer time. And again, this is all within DOLA's timeline as well, so we have to be cognizant of just like the state's need for their reporting and funding and how they're working with us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, as we want things sooner than later and stuff, but I respect that timeline. I'm not questioning it. I appreciate it.
Super. So the current status, so we joined the Grounded Solutions membership network. They've been great already. We've had multiple meetings with them. They actually looked through our entire RFP. Again, they're the ones that suggested us phasing it in this way, where it's broken down into these 4 categories with those timelines. They've been super helpful, and they've got a really great amount of resources for us to look at. They've got just examples of governing bylaws, how the deed restrictions would work, and of course, this first phase, we'd be looking how that can coordinate with APSHA. But they're sort of there as a resource. We now have this membership with them. And we're really going to be leaning on them. And even within the RFP, we pointed out Grounded Solutions network and looked to, they have sort of an outline of what we should be thinking about, and we pointed directly to 3 of those points in the RFP. So we're hopeful that a consultant will come knowing Grounded Solutions. They really are sort of this best practice group. And for the RFP, they actually sent us a list of about 18 consultants to send the RFP to. So they've got it really organized. So it's been fantastic working with them. And the RFP has been created and it was published to BidNet 2 weeks ago. We're going to do an optional pre-bid meeting in May, and then we're going to have the bids due June 3rd. This summer, we anticipate having interviews and sort of the selection and council approval sometime in summer. I was thinking maybe late June, early July, just based on the timeline for getting something signed with a consultant. Mayor Tory, you did a great job signing the DOLA grant agreement. Thank you for that. And DOLA's funding gets reimbursed quarterly just based on expenses. So again, since it's state funding, it's a really tight budgetary process. But basically, I will be doing reporting through DOLA quarterly, and then we get reimbursed. So that is all for the CLT. Happy to answer any questions at this time.
How does this compare to the AVLT in parallel?
So AVLT is certainly on our list too of partners to talk to. AVLT primarily focuses on the conservation of land, whereas this would be primarily, again, for housing and commercial. So I don't anticipate there being much crossover as they are looking, again, primarily for conservation.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about conflict or crossover. I was just thinking about their experience, and they've been in existence for a long time.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
The other, if a CLT owns a land, somebody wants to build a house on it, they don't have title to the land. Are they still going to be able to get a mortgage on something they don't have title for the land for? That's something to just in the next 2 years to be looking at.
The short answer is yes, there are ways to finance that without the land.
John?
Yeah, I think this is a really exciting development. Did seem at first glance like it's a long way out, but I think 2 years, in my experience, is actually a pretty short period of time. So, again, this is really exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes.
Bill?
Thanks. Thanks, Ben and Haley. I learned a lot here. Looking forward to learning more. At first learning about it, I'm a little skeptical about this for housing, although I'm open to learning more. I am very interested in this for commercial, and Armory really comes to mind. I know you didn't really present this in the context of the Armory, but this could be the right framework for the Armory. And I know the timing isn't super congruent, but sorry for the background noise. If you can hear that, apologies. But it could be a really interesting structure for the Armory, and ensuring that the Armory is set up in the best possible way for the community, or whatever sort of our next commercial project or property that we currently own and manage that might be better governed by a board of directors rather than council and staff. So I'm really interested in exploring that, seeing if we can somehow put that into place for the Armory, either now or later. But I'd like to learn a little bit more about how this works for housing. I'm a little skeptical about that at this point in time. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Sam, any questions or input here?
No, just excited to see more. I think these land trusts have proven to be pretty amazing institutions, so I look forward to Aspen having one and being able to used in this particular way.
Thank you. No comments here. I'm on board with the direction we're going. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hey, Jen.
Hello. Ooh. Hi. Mayor Tory, would you like me to get started?
Yeah, go right ahead. Thank you.
All right, so introductions. My name is Jen Phelan. I'm the development manager for the city of Aspen. I'm here to talk about the Armory, and I'd like to talk about two aspects, two projects associated with the Armory. One is the one that was just mentioned by Bill, the remodel and reuse of the building. Just a quick update, since you saw me last mid-March. Council approved that contract with CCY on March 12th. Currently, the project timeline is being finalized, inclusive of anticipated work sessions and design charrettes. We are currently formalizing department advisors for the project, so we have consistency throughout the process. A meeting was conducted with the operations consultants to just have an initial meeting with them and talk a little bit about what their expectations were. Are we going in the right direction with an operational study? And that's where we're at with the remodel and reuse of the Armory project right now.
So maybe one of the reminders is for council is like, right, the biggest decision you have coming up is we need some finalization of programmatic components. Not just the priority ranking of them, but if you're ready, if it's time that something's not going to happen, we need to start communicating that that is not going to be part of the project. Because we've been a little on the fence in the previous council discussions, and that's okay. I just want you to know the day is coming that here soon, by this summer, this has got to be cleared up, or else our design team is not able to complete the work which we've contracted them to do.
Well, and we are going to work with the operational study component to make sure that council has good information to assist in making those decisions.
I think we're prepared to have those discussions and work together to get to something that can have some success in our community. So I think we're all looking forward to it.
Great.
Does anybody have any specific questions?
Yeah, you know, I had 3 operators reach out to me after the CCY contract was approved, and I was wondering if you could potentially reach out to them in your operations study and see what it would take for them to be the operator with no guarantees. And I will say one aspect I heard from them was the lease length. of needing a longer-term commitment and what that would mean for the city to be able to grant a long-term lease to a master lease operator, but still feel protected because it is a community asset. And I ask these questions just because I want to see that overall success, and know that some of these operators are some really top of the line in their industry. So I was really impressed. And I know they could potentially be assets and probably be assets working with CCY.
Yeah, when I had the meeting with the group that we are consulting with, one of the things that they did mention, and I'm not going to be as articulate as they are, but off the top of my head, one of the things that they were saying is we need to make the table a little bit more so that people who are interested in the project to potentially operate the building can have a better idea of forecasting basically revenue, profit, and risk. And so right now, they were saying it just seems like you don't have it programmed enough that people can take a good look and really kind of figure out what they would be doing with their, as an operator.
And that's why, and you said you're doing the consultancy work, and that's why these operators were interested. They partnered with other architects. They did not win the RFP process, and I think they could be, still potentially be assets working with CCY architects and not the architects they originally submitted RFPs with. And that's why I think it's hugely important to get their input, if you can, to understand what it would take. And then we'll figure out at the council table whether it's palatable for us. But if we're so far apart that we can't get a master lease operator, I think as we solidify the vision, which I hope is a food hall, it'd be important to make sure that we can do it in a pragmatic way and not we're just a bunch of wishful thinkers up here and find out that no operator can do it under the constraints that the city puts on it and that the council is going to put on it. So.
Yeah, and I actually, just so you know, with the consultants that we are working with who do have food hall experience, I pointed out that we want straight answers regardless of what the answer is, because this is just an incredibly important project to the community. So I think we are going to get good information, and you know, if we have a participating, you know, we do have a public outreach component, so hopefully we can get some additional information.
And just to be clear on the solidifying of the vision, what is the timeline on that, and what sort of questions? I mean, because I thought November we did sort of have a pretty close to a vision, but I want to know actually where we're diverging and what we can do to make sure we have a very crystal clear vision and can give it to that operator.
So CCY is going to help us with that. I apologize, I haven't read when you're targeting Jen to be back at council with them. I know that you definitely have an August deadline, but I don't know if there's anything before that.
August is schematic. We will have a couple work sessions. We are trying to finalize those dates. I need to, I was just out of the office, and now CCY is out for spring break. So I will have that draft timeline. I think we're really going to start moving in April on this project, and I will be able to let you know what that detailed timeline is.
So I think you can expect another project update, at least in writing in May, early June from us, that we can really tell you, this is the date we've set aside. This is the date we really would, to keep on track, we need a decision by. Certainly the council could choose not to follow that date, but that is when you'll start delaying your project delivery if you don't make these decisions. And quite frankly, the decisions need to be made, and our intention is to bring them back to be passed by resolution, so there is clarity for future councils about what the direction is, and that all of that is contained in a document that can be referenced clearly.
And lastly, are we working towards potentially issuing another RFP for an operator? Is that what the consultancy work will lead to at some point?
We again, we need to finalize exactly what they're doing, but yes, I expect them to tell us this is the right time to do the RFP.
Okay. Yeah, well, you said it, I'm gonna stress it. I mean, even if it's not the answer you like, reaching out to these 3 operators and getting information has been vastly helpful to me, and I know it would be to anyone, especially the person that's gonna issue the RFP, understanding if someone's gonna apply for it, or we're just way off and we need to change our vision. Because yeah, success comes from being on the same page. So thank you for what you're working on. I appreciate it.
Any other questions here? Great.
Okay, other quick update, just the temporary relocation of ACRA into the Armory. I just wanted to provide a quick update on that. We have been working with ACRA on a design and cost estimates for just tenant improvements to that building on the ground floor. Due to the cost estimates, we've reduced scope to try and keep it within budget. Generally speaking, they're looking at just basically new paint, carpet, some new light fixtures, an accessible welcome counter, removal and fill of other service counters on the ground floor of the Armory, to just create some consistency and update the look a little bit of the space, and a cosmetic refresh of the bathrooms. We've spent $15,000 so far on architecture and cost estimator, and a building permit application was submitted on March 20th for this tenant finish, basically. We're looking at target completion and relocation October, November, basically off-season. And we need to start an RFP for a contractor for the services for the work, but wanted to ensure that council supports the expenditure of the balance of funds of the $200,000 that was allocated to this project prior to issuing an RFP for a contractor.
Yes, I'm a yes. I'm supportive. I continue to try to think if there's a more efficient way for us to get here, and but we're talking about basically moving ACRA in for 2 years, something like that, year and a half almost. Or?
Right. They'll pretty much be there until it's time to start the work on the Armory.
Yeah.
As we've been clear with ACRA, is that we have not guaranteed post-Armory what that might look like and what space may be available for their use. The intention initially, I'd had direction for several years that both back of house and front of house visitor centers would go in the building. Another reason why we need the Armory programming figured out so we can give clarity to the ACRA board, should we not be able to accommodate their office use anymore in a government subsidized building.
Okay. Bill?
Thanks. Jen, could you tell me how many square feet of office space ACRA currently occupies and how many square feet they will occupy in the Armory as proposed?
I have it, and I'll have to email it to you, because I think in the building permit, I said the amount that they're proposing that we're looking at touching, that they're using on the ground floor is just over 4,000 square feet. I mean, that's walkways, circulation, some storage. And then I just don't want to guesstimate on what they have right now in the old powerhouse, but I am very happy to look that up and get that to you.
Thanks, that'd be great. And my second question, and what I'm really trying to get at is, how many square feet do they need, and what is it going to cost us as the city of Aspen to provide that for them under this scenario? And is there a better alternative? If we're talking about spending $200,000 to provide suitable office space for the next year and a half or 2 years, is there ready to go office space on the market that can be rented that they can move into where we're not constrained and we're not, creating a bunch of construction waste that is also going to go in the trash in a year and a half, 2 years, and we're not spending a bunch of city money that could be better spent on repurposing the Armory, et cetera. I'm still not really sure why this is money that we should be spending as the city of Aspen. That's a fundamental question in my mind. But, putting that aside, let's look at this really impartially and neutrally and say, does this $200,000 make any sense to spend, or is there a better home to land ACRA in for the next year and a half, 2 years, or maybe beyond that? We know for sure that there's space available in the Mill Building across the street from City Hall. I believe there's other suitable office space available on the free market in Aspen right now, and I'm an expert on that, but I think that that is true. I just don't want to be encumbered by, I personally don't want to be encumbered by ACRA's presence in the Armory while we're trying to repurpose that building, while we're trying to move the data center out of there. Maybe do some asbestos remediation before we do repurposing if that's necessary, and the list goes on. So that's what I'm trying to get at, Jen, is I want to make sure we take a step back and ask the important question.
And the other thing to keep in mind, I hear you, Bill, but the other thing to keep in mind too is it's not just ACRA that's being considered to going into the Armory temporarily. If we redo the Main Street cabin in 2025, you're looking at potentially transportation and special events being relocated potentially in the Army with the old powerhouse timeline of remodel. You're also looking at asset moving over.
Hang on one second, because I think that's all very valid. I think Bill is making a pretty simple suggestion. He wants consideration to make sure that this direction is the most efficient, and I think we can respond to that maybe at another time through conversation, through email or whatever, to give him the insurances or even look into some other stuff. So I appreciate your response to him at this time, but I don't think you need to go any further. Okay. Bill is just saying, hey, with all that in consideration, I just want to know that this is the efficient path for us. So I think spending more time on that and making sure that we're checking those boxes is a great idea, but we don't need to clarify that any further right this second.
I'm just going to add that the council, though, did give direction for the adopted resolution directs us to move ACRA into this space, and the same conversation happened about 2.5 years ago. Yep. Very similar one, when the decision was made, for historical context for our new members. Yeah, I totally appreciate it, and I think Bill's aware as well, and he's just wondering if that, now that we're having those cost estimates come to us, if that makes the most sense for it. And Bill, we'll follow up on this some more, just so that there's more comfort level around that.
Just for clarity, the discussions in the past for running or moving ACRA's office to the Armory are temporary. It has, we don't have any programming decisions in place for the permanent use after the Armory is redone.
I'm sorry, I cut you off, I apologize.
No, I was just trying to find an end to the sentence.
And so in March 2023, the council passed a new agreement, master agreement with ACRA. And in that agreement, following the negotiation direction we had at the time, staff had at the time, it does include the intention and expectation that ACRA's back of house and front of house is in the Armory. So that it would be a change and would require us to revisit that contract with ACRA as a service provider. One of the reasons we get some of the pricing we get is because of the subsidy of things such as office space. It's really up to the council where you feel the most comfortable at for the community. So we're happy to bring a conversation to you regarding that. And if the council does want to re-examine that component of the master agreement it was passed in March of 23, and it's good for 5 years. I think it was 5 years effective January 1 of 23. It's my recollection.
You're losing me a little in the conversation. Back of house, front of house for ACRA. I don't understand.
So front of house is your visitor center, immediate interaction. So on the associated needs to that, so programmatic element on green space adjacent to the building potentially, the parking changes that need to happen behind, and on Hopkins Street to accommodate a visitor center use that don't necessarily work in a traditional office location. Then the back of house is the storage and office space for their business operations on both the destination marketing and on the traditional chamber activities.
Because I thought in our last work sessions around the Armory, we did not have support for office space in the Armory. I know that there was support for a visitor center and possibly the Forest Center visitors center being there, but I did not think that there was an appetite for ACRA offices to be located in.
And that was a straw poll. And right now, I have a resolution directing me. So that's why we'd like to get programming finalized so that we can bring an updated resolution to you for direction. Because right now, the formal direction I have is still to keep that back of house office use in the Armory. And why I'm pushing you to say this needs to get resolved so that we can provide formal notice and so that the consultancy team has clear direction.
Okay.
So I need.
From my perspective, this needs to get resolved so you can provide clear direction. I do not want office space in the Armory.
So
Thanks.
again, it has to just come back as a resolution, though.
Understood.
And it did come back as a resolution.
That did, Jen?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's my
So-
mistake, then I've missed it, that did.
So the resolution did come back as Tori remembers it. And again, I don't have it in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly what it says, but it listed the priority of uses being food hall, community lounge,
Potential retail.
possible visitor centers, and it said office space was not a priority. I think
Right,
that's how
so
it was
it
worded.
tells us a priority list, it doesn't tell
it-
us what you actually want.
hasn't been decided.
That's what we need to say, we're gonna commit X amount to a commercial use and Y amount to a community use. That piece really needs to be finalized.
Jen, could you do us a courtesy of digging up that reso and forwarding
course.
it to us?
Yep.
I believe that was November 28th.
Yep.
Of
Rats
2023?
remember.
Can you be more
2024.
specific, Scott? I don't know, you're losing.
That's impressive. You remember the date.
Well, thank you. I mean, I appreciate the updates. I think we're heading in the right direction. It's obviously a priority for all members of council to try to get this building returned to community use and access. And as I said in our recent meeting, it's a bear of a project. This is not an easy one. And so I think everybody should know that there's, going to be bumps and bruises as we get to something that's absolutely fantastic for the future of Aspen. But I think that council's direction and sentiment have been heard, so. Did you have any other info that you wanted to fill us in on?
No, I just wanted to get some direction on an RFP for a contractor and expending funds for ACRA, and I think we have a little more work to do.
Okay.
As I recall, the CCY Phase 1, in my understanding, is that in that short term is when we're going to make that programming decision.
Correct.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Jen Uten, anything else for us? Do you want to parade anybody else out for us, or are you done?
No, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jen.
I would just add to this is, right, we only highlighted 3 of the big projects tonight. There's a lot more in your goals. It's a very aggressive goal list with 6 goals with several, how should I say this? There are, I can't call them mini goals even underneath.
Big
the,
bites.
Big goals.
Yeah, they are.
So, we'll continue to work with you and keeping you updated. And if you have any questions after reading, again, any of the details in the packet, please reach out.
Thank you.
That
you all.
50 number was accurate. There are 50 milestones that are under all of those goals.
Wow.
See what we can do in a few hours in a retreat?
Yeah, right. Sorry. All right, thank you so much. We want to say thank you to GrassRoots as always. We are scheduled for a regular meeting on Tuesday at 5 p.m. If anybody is interested in making public comment, please join us here in City Hall at 5 o'clock on Tuesday. Thank you. Have a good night.